Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dimitri Johnson, and you're listening to MMALatestNews.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest. We're here for the MMA debate, of course. I'm here joined with Reese, and we've got a couple of topics to mull over after what's happened over the past week, and of course the weekend results. Of course, we'll be touching on those. But of course, Reese, John Jones, Adesanya have been going at it quite heavy on social media recently, back and forth for the past week or two now, and it has got pretty heavy, hasn't it? When does the line become crossed in a battle of mental warfare like this?
I think when you start bringing other family members into it, if you haven't been catching up on what's being said, I think it's a case of what hasn't been said at this point. Look, I mean, if UFC can't control what people say, that's just a bottom line. We saw that with the comments that Colby Covington made not too long ago. The UFC can't control it. They can advise, they can teach you how to behave on social media, but they can't make you do anything you don't want to do. This is brewing very, very nicely for a fight down a line, but I think it has crossed a line now, but I don't see it getting any. I don't see it getting any worse than it already is, if that makes sense. But I think it has crossed the line. But I think it makes the fight, and when it does happen, even more exciting.
Yeah, there is the saying that all's fair in love and war, and if these two do step into the cage, they're going to be punching and kicking each other's, with the goal to knock the other out. So when it becomes verbal like this, it can be a very different story. Whether it's because those bruises heal, but those words will still remain on social media, won't it? And it'll still be circulated, so it might cut that little bit deeper. But at the same time, it's like these two are professional fighters, just to play devil's advocate there. So it's almost not, it's not funny, but it's funny in the sense that we sign up to watch them fight each other, but as soon as it starts getting a bit verbal and a bit too aggressive on the verbal side of it, we tell them to stop.
Yeah, I think as MMA fans, we all are like that. We're all guilty of that. Like, we can all sit here and say, "Oh, that's probably crossed the line" when you mention someone's family member. But at the end of the day, they are going to get in the cage and just batter each other for however long a fight goes on. For me, I love beef between two fighters. Especially if it's two big fighters as well. It adds to the hype of a fight, and obviously the next stage after that is hoping that the fight actually delivers. But for me, at the end of all of this, fight's over, you shake hands, because at the end of the day, it's all about respect, and you respect each other as a fighter. You may not like the person, but I think Jones respects Izzy's skill, and likewise, because I think Izzy come out and said that he used to look up to John Jones. So for me, like, as long as at the end of the day they shake hands, and they don't have to be best friends, but the beef in the build up to a fight, have your fight, hopefully it's an incredible fight, and then shake hands and move on, or we get a rematch or whatever. So yeah,
definitely. From Izzy's standpoint, you mentioned there that he's been revising John Jones since UFC 93. He's been watching him as a fan, and he seems to have that mindset and the personality where he does revise the opponent's sort of mentality as well as their physical aspects. So the fact that we haven't seen John Jones become this sort of aggressive verbally since his feuds with DC. So maybe Adesanya has watched him grow up, and also seen these fights with the likes of Dominic Reyes, Thiago Santos, and Anthony Smith, which haven't been that back and forth to this sort of level. So he's probably thinking, oh, if I poke here and prod here, I'm going to get the best version of John Jones. Because there's been a lot of comments that John Jones may be either bored or a little bit less motivated with the fights that he's had recently.
Yeah, I think you've got it spot on. I think that the last vintage John Jones performance we saw was probably the DC rematch. Maybe you could say the Gus rematch, because he did absolutely dominate Gus. But for the last few fights, especially, it's kind of been the general consensus that you're not going to see a vintage John Jones performance unless he's up for a fight. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he's moved up to heavyweight, is because that's where the super fights are. You can even throw in DC in there, which I doubt would happen again, but that's always there. And then you've got Stipe, you've got Francis Ngannou, you've got Izzy, but I don't know where Izzy fits into that with John moving up. I don't know, but I think that those 3 fights I just mentioned are the 3 fights where I think you're going to see the best John Jones, maybe against a Brock Lesnar as well if he was to come back or whatever. So I think the bigger the fight and the better the opponent, the better John Jones we get, and I think that's better for all MMA fans.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think the fact that because I was saying on Twitter recently, this fight 2-3 months ago was the absolute dream fight for me. Obviously, John Jones was still the light heavyweight champion at the time, so he had that little bit more of an incentive for Izzy to move up. But at the moment, if he moved up to light heavyweight, at least you got John Jones, who's probably building to become a heavyweight at the moment. It would be not silly. It'd be a little bit. There's less interest in the fact that seeing these two both at light heavyweight at the moment without that title on the line at least, because one, the Izzy, it distinguishes that double champ status potentially, and also for John Jones, we are expecting him to move up to heavyweight. So 3 months ago, if you had given me this fight and gone, right, this is going to be Izzy moving up for champ status potentially, I'd want to see it next week. But again, if you gave me this fight as it is currently looking, I'm still going to purchase it anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I think it's with John moving up, it's hard to know when this fight's going to happen anytime soon. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, John's more than disciplined enough in terms of his work ethic. There's no questions about that. But sometimes when you move up, you find it hard to then move back down. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a worry for me. But I feel that for the fight that is between Izzy and John Jones at 205, I think that's a sort of fight and the hype you can actually really, really come back down for. Because John Jones has got nothing left to prove in that 205 division. He's the best 205 fighter of all time, and there's no doubt about that. Look, Izzy had to clear out his division, which he kind of has done to an extent. There's probably only Jared Cannonier left, and maybe Darren Till. He's kind of already gone through the top contenders, and John's done the same, and now John's moving up. So I do think we'll see that fight, but I don't think it's going to be for at least another 2 years for me.
Do you think, let's say that John Jones, we get Stipe versus John, say we get Stipe and Ngannou maybe 2 next, because I think that's the fight to be made. John Jones steps in and faces the winner of that, and we see him become the heavyweight champion. Obviously, it's very, very unlikely, but let's say Israel Adesanya made a comment, I think it was back in January or even before that, saying he would chase John Jones to heavyweight, and he does have a heavyweight, he has got heavyweight contenders on his record from kickboxing. Do you think that's a legitimate argument of him moving up from 185, following up to heavyweight perhaps?
I don't think so. I think I said it before, like when I wasn't aware of Adesanya before he entered UFC. I think I'd heard him. I'd heard of his name, but when I looked at him, I instantly thought he's not an 85er. He's a welterweight maybe, because he's so tall for the weight class, and he's not extremely muscle orientated. He just uses everything to his advantage. When John Jones goes up to heavyweight, John Jones is going to be an absolute unit at heavyweight. He's going to be sort of like Brock Lesnar, obviously not as steep as that, but I think he's going to really round out well up at heavyweight. I don't think the right idea for Adesanya would be to go up to heavyweight, but I think it's something Izzy would do because he wants to fight so badly. Yeah. But I think you've got to find a compromise in the middle, and you've got to kind of meet in that 205, and that's where I think it's perfect. But does John have the want, so to say, to go back down to 205 and do that weight cut? I know he doesn't cut too much weight, but does he really want to go back down there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, there's a lot of talk about bringing in more weight classes into the UFC, of course. And, we're talking about different, we're talking about Izzy potentially putting on 40 pounds of him to go up to like 220. And, that would be tough for him. A lot of people don't think he would make that 205 pound limit. But I think there's a lot of similarities with him and John Jones in the fact that I think they're quite similarly built, aren't they? Albeit the size difference between them is still quite large. Their stature is still very similar. And I've said it before that if you put McGregor, Anderson Silva, and John Jones together in a little lab, and you took out their 3 best qualities, you'll probably get Adesanya. I think that's where he's probably studied the game a little bit. He studied Conor McGregor's talking, he studied Anderson Silva's style, and he's taken John Jones' stature and what he's done, and he's almost molded it together and come up with his own blend that he's now gone on into this incredible unbeaten run as middleweight champion and a professional fighter as a whole.
Yeah, I think we're kind of, obviously Izzy's already a superstar, there's no doubt about that, but I think you're looking at the future GOAT. I think that's quite a sensible argument to have already, and you know, him and John are very similar, you know, in terms of their respective weight classes. They're not the biggest in terms of, you know, pure stature, in terms of muscle. And stuff. They're not very muscular, you know, but they don't need to be, because they're just so superior when it comes to their skill base than anybody else in the division. And that's what we're seeing with Izzy. He's clearing out his division. We saw John, obviously John did it when he was a little bit younger, you know, so John's got that argument of I'll always be better than Izzy because I did it, you know, world champion at 23 and stuff like that. But they are very similar, and the career path is kind of going along the same way. Obviously, John's had his issues outside the octagon. Hopefully, Izzy doesn't have those. But they are kind of going along the same path, and they're just destined to meet. And when it does, I think it's going to be explosive, and it's going to... I probably wouldn't be surprised if it's the biggest fight in UFC history.
Definitely. I think, you know, especially if they put it in Africa, if they put it somewhere in, like, if they put it in Cameroon or Nigeria, you know, brought Ngannou onto the card, brought Kamaru Usman onto the card, should he still be champion when that does happen? I think you've got the biggest card in history there, especially even if you put it probably in Australia or New Zealand. You're going to sell that place out back in the Marvel Stadium, perhaps, which has got 60, 70,000 people capacity. That's selling the whole arena out at that point. And you're right. And I think the only thing that's missing is that title. So whether, you know, maybe Izzy goes up, maybe defends middleweight title twice more, then moves up to light heavyweight, takes that title, and then maybe, you know, tries to get John Jones to come back down to 205, and then we get that super fight somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, in terms of a location, I don't think you're going to get John going over to Australia personally. John's going to demand the A side of those negotiations, which is going to be hard when it comes to the fight, because they're just both going to be the kings of their respective divisions. But yeah, it's such a big fight, and I think it has to happen at 205. That's a sensible weight class. I mean, you could maybe do like a 195 if you really wanted to, but you know, that revolves around the whole argument of new weight classes, which I'm not a fan of particularly. I'm kind of with Dana on this one. The weight classes are there. You know, you've got to pick one, and if you can't make weight, then you got to move up. But this fight has to happen at 205. There's no doubt about it. Can't happen at heavyweight. Obviously, John isn't making 185. That's just evident, because that would be ridiculous. Can you imagine? Can you imagine John on the scales at 85?
That's
Someone's
like
going to have to wheelchair
him
in. Yeah,
it's McGregor going in at featherweight.
It's never going to happen, and it's not going to be a good sight if it was. So 205, 2020, what? 2022 maybe? You look at it.
But they said they wanted it 2021 at the Raiders Stadium, didn't they? Now, whether that, obviously with COVID, it's unpredictable in terms of when we can have fans back and when we can do something of that magnitude. But again, if 2021's on Izzy's radar, and I think this is where Izzy's credibility comes in. Everything he said he's going to do, he's done so far. So if he says he's going to fight him in 2021, I imagine we're going to see that fight next year.
Yeah, I mean, Izzy's got probably one more fight to clear out the division. You're looking at February, March next year, maybe, for the winner.
He said he wanted to fight this year, and obviously that December card doesn't have a main event yet. And should Jared Cannonier and Robert Whittaker, probably the winner of that, moves on, if they want a quick turnaround, maybe you see that fight in December. Then obviously you got Darren Till, Jack Hermansson in the beginning of December. So that's probably his final fight before he could say he's cleared out the division there.
Yeah, I just don't see how the fight between Rob and Jared isn't an absolute war. 15 minutes, and I think both are going to come out. Both are going to be transported to hospital or probably something. So I don't know whether we're going to see another title defense at the end of the year. Fingers crossed. Even if it's a 15-minute fight between Rob and Jared, and you know they're both relatively fit enough, and you know they can come back in December. But if not, as I said, you're looking at February, March time maybe for that. For that. I say last defense as if like it's his last fight. Like that's just the last clear contender, isn't it? Really. Yeah. I mean. Yeah. The other two are
before Chimaev comes in and wrecks shop everywhere and gets.
I'm not talking about Chimaev at middleweight, because it's just, for me it's a lost cause. But Izzy's got one fight.
Yeah.
And the thing is with John Jones is his next fight has to be for a title.
Yeah.
There's 100%. It's I think it's exactly the same with like what it is. I know we always get onto Conor McGregor, but it's the same with Conor has to headline a pay-per-view. It's almost like an unwritten rule. He has to do that. John's next fight has to be for the heavyweight title. There's no doubt about that. But there's so many moving pieces. There's so many opponents he could face. That's why I'm probably more surprised that he moved up and he hasn't stayed at 205. And then Izzy maybe didn't, beat Costa. beats Jared or Rob and then fights Jones. So I'm surprised Jones has moved up when he has, when that fight was there. But we'll see when it happens. But all of us and we're all going to be so hyped for it, and as is everyone. And I think it'll be the biggest fight in terms of pay-per-view numbers as well. But that fight has to happen with fans.
Definitely.
Has to happen with fans.
Definitely, I think it's good that you mentioned McGregor there, because obviously we have this rule, as you mentioned, with McGregor headlining the pay-per-view, but obviously he can fight, at will with not anything on the line. In the fact that he can main event pretty much any event that he wanted and not have that lightweight title or the welterweight title if he decides, on the top of that bill. And it's almost interesting that we regard that for him, but when Masvidal and Diaz wants to fight, we have to make up a belt for it. It'd be interesting to see if we had Adesanya Jones, would they then create some sort of belt for it? I was thinking maybe the pound for pound belt, but that's possible to then move around who's number one pound for pound, or do you just do it as a non-title belt potentially at the end of the night on a stacked card?
I think you have to do it for a title, don't you? I think even if his fight happens next year, Izzy would have had one more fight at least. Jones potentially one fight. So, but each time Izzy fights and each time John fights, they get bigger, and bigger and bigger. And I've said it before, like there's just something different about a John Jones fight week. I'm now starting to get that feeling with an Adesanya fight week. Conor McGregor's another one. It's just different. It's just a different vibe around the whole company. And I say around the places where I'm there. Obviously, I'm not there, but the whole vibe around everything is just.
You see it on social media, don't you? Everything's a little bit more vibrant. Everything's popping off a little bit more. You're getting a couple of retweets or a couple of extra likes than you would on a general fight week.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you look at the embedded that they do as well, and that gets double, triple reviews and stuff like that. So. I think it's probably sensible, despite what I've just said before. I'm contradicting myself, but just let this fight build. Let the Twitter beef carry on, obviously, as long as it doesn't go too far, and then we can make it an absolute super fight whenever it wants to happen.
Definitely. We make this the last point before we move on to our next topic. But do you think, we saw it with UFC 229, and I don't know if this rivalry is going to go in that sort of same vein, where I don't imagine Adesanya or Jones rocking up at each other's camp throwing, dollies at bosses or whatnot. But we saw what the UFC used with that sort of the resources that they had, and they used it to promote it. Do you think they may be sitting back almost secretly loving it, almost writing the narrative and the promotions while these two are going at it online? Or do you think they, we've seen Dana's comments, as you mentioned, of the freedom of speech. So it's unlikely that they're going to step in and go, right, you two are talking way too much and you're almost disrespecting the company at that point.
Potentially, but I think, as you said, when we saw it with 229 with Khabib and Conor, like that was the promo video that John Malkovich did. The whole dolly, the whole incident was there.
Yeah.
And, Dana White got criticised for that. I was saying that should that really be part of the build-up, and it was like absolutely, because it
happened.
It happened. It's the whole reason.
Yeah.
This hatred between the two is so huge. So I think that they'll use that. The Twitter interactions, I think there's going to be some face-to-face interactions before they fight. I mean, I think this is where you may get ego, but I don't know whether you'll see, John Jones headline in a pay-per-view against Stipe or Francis, and then is he being co-main? I don't know whether you'd see something like that. Maybe then you'd get the interaction, but I don't think we've saw a proper face-to-face interaction between the pair. So that's something that could be used as well, but. We all know, like the UFC like to go about it in a certain way, and they like to be front of the queue. And there's a reason why they're the best MMA promotion in the world, because they do things that other promotions don't. And that kind of Khabib incident you mentioned is, it's just that's a whole reception.
It's actually history now. I think 229, I believe, is the biggest pay-per-view selling of all time. So when you look at number one, it is that event, and you go back and watch all the promotion to that event. It is fueled on a lot of hatred between the two.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I think you have to use that for a magnitude of reasons, and you do use that. People get more and more hyped for a fight, especially if people haven't been keeping up to date with it. I think that's what you got to take into account as well. Is for people that haven't been, keeping up to date with it. This little intro video that John Malkovich does, and shout out John Malkovich because he's phenomenal at what he does with his promos. They generally send shivers down your spine. But someone can watch that and understand the story, even if you're just I hate to use the word, but a casual MMA fan who just watches the super fights or the big fights, you watch that video, you know exactly what the beef is between the pair of them, you know how big it is, and then you get even more excited for the fight, and it brings over the casuals as well.
100%. Now we move on to our second one, of course. This week we just had UFC Fight Island 4, and both Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandame had incredible wins. I'd say Durandame more with all due respect because she got her first professional submission win. Obviously, we know these two have fought Amanda Nunes before. Did you see anything where you could almost point to one of these two saying you deserve the rematch, or is it going to be more of the fact that these two need to fight each other once again to determine the number one contender at bantamweight?
Firstly, I think that Jermaine and Holly do have to fight again. I think they're number one and number two effectively. But in terms of did I see anything? No, not really. I don't think I saw anything from Holly that made me go, "Oh my god, she has to face Amanda again." And Jermaine, I'm going to criticise Jermaine here, but her ground game is absolutely woeful.
And she won by submission.
And she won by submission. It was like we were talking shit about it in the group chat, weren't we? We were saying how bad it was, and then a minute later she got a submission. You know, it was just ridiculous. I mean, Juliana Pena did such a good job to an extent. Obviously, she got submitted. She's kind of done that well, but she did a really good job in getting it to the ground, and you know, a couple of nearly submissions in there. But in terms of a Jermaine fight with Amanda, we saw that. You know, Amanda. I think that was the first time in one of Amanda's recent fights that we've kind of saw a little bit of vulnerability about her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially when you're an established striker like Durandame is, you can't stand with her. And that's when we saw Amanda take her to the ground, and she just ended the fight effectively. She just, you know, neutralized Jermaine's attacks, and it was over. And we saw that again on the weekend. Juliana was getting pieced up on the feet, the reach, everything that Jermaine's got over her, took her to the ground, and she was dominating it. But she just fell into the submission trap. And look, I'm not saying she's not good on the floor. And obviously, every single MMA fighter, if you give them your neck, they're going to choke you out 99% of the time. So it's not of any surprise. But at the same time, with how bad it looked in that Pena fight, she eventually went to get the submission. She did well. Holly put on a clinic. But I think that the company was hoping that Aldana would win because we always...
That's a fresh matchup then, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's completely fresh. When we always joke about Holly always getting a title shot at whatever weight class, and you know, Holly did what Holly does best, and she just neutralized any attacks that Aldana had. So I think the fight to make is Holly versus Jermaine again, get that rematch going, and then the winner fights Nunes.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, Irene Aldana almost frustrated me in the sense because I think Dan Hardy mentioned this on the comms. I watched it Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, and you could see her almost chasing Holly Holm. It wasn't like, you know, when you watch fights, you might see someone choose to have the inside of the octagon, and then you normally see those two black lines, and the person on the outside is almost doing laps around it almost to gauge their distance and their range. But Aldana kept chasing Holly Holm, and someone who's experienced as Holm is going to eat up all day. Holly Holm didn't look fantastic. It was her best performance since that title win, of course. But at the same time, I think Aldana almost gave it to a little bit. And again, to reference Dan Hardy, he almost questioned the corner of Aldana to be like, why aren't you almost changing things up? Why are you sticking to the game plan? Because we know, Caitlin Vieira knows it firsthand how hard Aldana hits. And, she wasn't able to land her punches or really gauge her distance on Saturday night, which was a shame.
It was, especially after that Caitlin Vieira knockout. It was just superb. So we were all kind of hoping that, it's veteran versus prospect to an extent. Aldana's on the way up. But, like, Holly's a world champion boxer in the past. You can't just follow her around.
No.
Because she's gonna sit back, and now and again she'll come in with a punch and then just get in and out, and that's what she's so good at doing. So it was a weird game plan for Aldana, but I'm not going to say it was a really bad game plan. It might have just been a really good game plan by Holly's team. That could have been a game plan for Holly, was to just sit back, run around the edge, but counter when they needed to. And look, she won every single minute. She won every single round. She dominated the fight, and I think she showed
as well.
Yeah, she did, and I wasn't expecting anything like that. I was expecting it to be a stand-up 25 minutes, and for the most part it was. But I think we can give credit to Holly that she did well. But I think that what we saw was that Aldana's not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
She still needs to fight a couple. To be honest, I'd be even obviously, like you look at the rankings and you can kind of play matchmaker yourself, but you might look at maybe like an Aspen Ladd versus Aldana fight. You know, Ketlin Vieira as well. Obviously, she won't face off against Aldana again, but you know, there's a few relatively good players out there in that 35 division. But I think Jermaine versus Holly for the number one contender. Obviously, Amanda's fighting
Megan Anderson.
Megan Anderson in December. So you know, get that one out of the way, get the Holly Jermaine rematch out of the way, and then Amanda's got her next fight at 35.
Yeah, of course. I think for Aldana, you mentioned the experience versus prospect thing. I think that fight is exactly how it planned out. You saw someone who, I believe, mention Dan Hardy. Holly Holm was in her 7th, 5th round fight, and 5 of them have been title fights. So it's going to be interesting. It's gonna be very interesting. Obviously, Aldana, that was her first main event, her first 5-round fight. So I think she's probably going to learn a lot more having lost that than she would have won, because she probably would have then probably been booked in that title shot against Amanda Nunes, who we know is so far ahead at the moment. But I'm interested to see. Obviously, we're seeing Holly Holm go to featherweight. I'm interested to see potentially Aldana go to featherweight. I didn't realize how big of the bantamweight she was until she was in the cage there with Holly Holm. You see how tall she is. Not obviously not quite as tall as Megan Anderson, but she's got a longer leg reach. And obviously Duranda May was the former featherweight champion. I'd be interested to see. Obviously, we know how ahead of the game Nunes is, and she's controlling both divisions at the moment. But it's almost interesting to me. Is the path almost? Do you add 10 pounds to your weight, go up to featherweight, and you might be only one win away? Whereas if you're 4th, 5th, 6th in that bantamweight division, you might need 2, 3, 4 wins. You've got to beat Holly Holm, Duranda May, maybe now obviously Irina Aldana before you get a title shot. I don't know if it, on a career aspect, if it's more likely or more possible to become champion at featherweight at the moment.
I think so, but that's the beauty of when Nunes beat Cyborg, because obviously Cyborg was a genuine 45er. She's probably a 55er, but she's cut down to the 45 limit, and that's the beauty of that win that Amanda had, because there's not many 45ers in the UFC. She has that ability to defend both divisions at the same time. And we're seeing that now. Like, she beats Megan Anderson, which I'm not doing an Amanda Nunes prediction again because I got the last one wrong. But she beats Megan Anderson, who's next at 45 for her.
Yeah.
Because I think not too long ago, Dana spoke about a new influx of 45ers, but we haven't saw any of those matched up yet.
Mm-hmm.
So then she'd obviously go back down to 35 and defend against whoever she defends against. I just think that we'll see a fight against Anderson. I think we'll see one more title defense 35, and then I think that will be it for Amanda Nunes. And I do worry for that 45 division, because there's not, of note, fighter-wise, you've got Felicia Spencer and Megan Anderson, and that's it. There's not really many fighters of note. If you look at, obviously there's no rankings for it. There's only one ranking in the featherweight division. That's Amanda Nunes at the top. So
100%.
I do worry for that division, but I know that Dana wants to have that division. But if Amanda does what I've just said, and she, beats Anderson, beats the next contender at 35, and then retires, I can't see the 45 belt being around anymore, personally. Yeah,
I think that's the main thing, especially if Amanda Nunes retires as champion, then Dana and the UFC can almost go, well, we've given you your best, and you're not be able to defeat her. And we saw it last year towards the beginning of it with the flyweight division for the men. A lot of people were going that we don't need that division, it's too boring. And obviously Henry Cejudo came in, saved it, and it would have been interesting had one Demetrius Johnson beaten Henry Cejudo in that rematch, or had got the scorecard in his favour, whether we probably would have seen the end of that, because obviously Demetrius Johnson would have been traded with Ben Askren. And if Amanda Nunes retires as champion, you can then go, it's difficult to even matchmake below, because everyone's faced each other. Megan Anderson and Felicia Spencer have already been at it. So that's the only sort of interest to me. If Aldana can put on £10, and whether should be still an optimal almost advantage in that weight class, whether her versus Megan Anderson or her versus Felicia Spencer, maybe. Duranda May, of course, as you mentioned previously, that gave Nunes her closest run, whether she could maybe do a little bit better, or have a better chance at featherweight perhaps.
Maybe, but at the same time, I don't want to. I say I don't want to push fighters out their weight classes if they're not comfortable and they're not at their optimum performance levels. So I'm not a fan of just put like when Hardy went up to face Cyborg. That only happened because Cyborg didn't have an opponent. I'm not a fan of, Holly going up there, for example, or Jermaine going up. I know Jermaine's obviously done it before, but for me, stick in your weight class. And look, I mean, Amanda has that ability to defend both titles because of the lack of fighters in that 45 division. So I'm quite happy with how it's playing out at the moment. Obviously it works for Amanda. She's cementing herself as, I mean, obviously she already is a female GOAT. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I think she's solidifying herself as one of the greatest fighters of all time. Like, whether that be just overall, she's definitely up there now. The run that she's been on ever since she beat Misha Tate has just been phenomenal. So for me, I'm happy with the divisions the way they are at the moment, but I don't see that 45 division being there for too much longer, unless the UFC goes over to Bellator. Takes all the fighters from there. You're looking at Julia Budd, maybe she comes over, or maybe vice versa. Maybe you see the closure of that 45 division, and you see Megan Anderson and Spencer go over to Bellator, because the Bellator featherweight division is actually not too bad. There's a hell of a lot more fighters there, So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Amanda Nunes retires, because as you said, Felicia and Megan have already fought. So do you really want to see that again for the vacant belt? Probably not. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know.
Yeah, and you mentioned there I think Amanda Nunes has 2 years max left in the UFC before she's just become a new mother in the past month, of course, and I think she's going to want to step down with her family. Obviously, Nina Ansaroff in the strawweight division is probably going to be retiring within the next 2 years too, and I can see them two being done. But as you mentioned, the retirement thing, but she's only won one title defense off matching Ronda Rousey's record. You'd put good money on her one equaling that, and if not, going on to beat that record and taking it as her own. And of course, with the featherweight division, although it's not been around too long, if she defends her title against Megan Anderson, she comes the joint record holder for defenses in that division as well. So, another defense for her put her in a world of their own for both divisions there. And you could easily see her, making 3 title defenses across the 2 divisions and walking off as the guaranteed GOAT of women's MMA. And as you mentioned, I think she's becoming closer and closer to being, included on that Mount Rushmore of MMA fighters.
Yeah, and maybe those records that are there to be broken might be a motivation for her to keep fighting until she breaks it. But if she loses, then obviously she's in a difficult situation. Now, do I see anyone beating Amanda Nunes? No. I think the best fighter she's come up against on her run since she's been on a good run is probably Valentina. And for me, that's a fight I want to see again at bantamweight. I think that's the closest fight. I think Amanda lost the second fight between the pair, and a lot of people did also think that Valentina won. So I think for me, that third fight makes sense, but obviously Dana doesn't like the idea of that third fight. So maybe she has the 3 more title defenses over the 2 divisions, and then maybe we see a last fight against Shevchenko, because I think Shevchenko is up there in the top 3, maybe top 4 of one of the greatest women's fighter of all time as well. So Amanda's going to cement a legacy, which she already has done, but she's going to cement it further. As you mentioned, Nina Ansaroff just had a baby, so I don't know how the dynamic is there. Maybe it's a scenario of Nina wants to come back and fight, and then Amanda will need to be there for a baby. So it remains to be seen what will happen. But we've got this featherweight title fight next up for her. Get through that, and then we'll see what's out there for her.
Definitely, and that leads us on to our last topic. And of course, it's become a bit of a meme in MMA at the moment. Darren Till is potentially going to be cornering Mike Perry. Obviously, we've seen the two go back and forth for a couple of years now. Darren Till, the liver partner of the course, has always put it down to banter, and I don't know if the British banter always crosses over to that side of the pond in America, does it? Mike Perry has not taken too kindly to everything Darren Till's done, especially this year. Darren Till's been absolute gold on social media. If there's any awards going out there, they've already got his name on it, I'd imagine, Bruce.
Absolutely. Darren has just took the media side of it by absolute storm. And I think it's quite clever, because he hasn't had a win in the Octagon for a while now. So he's kind of taken the outlook away from that, and now it's onto a social media game, which he said is phenomenal. He's just brought out his new Raw Dog brand, which is it's just iconic. And obviously Mike Perry's had a lot of criticism and controversy because of actions outside of a cage, and also inside the cage with having no cornerman apart from his, I think now fiance,
Pregnant fiance as well.
Pregnant
Breaking
fiance
records.
as well, yeah. But yeah, breaking records all the way around. So he definitely rose eyebrows, I think, when he announced that, highest bidder comes in my corner. And from what Mike Perry's manager was saying, can't remember his name. Is it Abraham? I think it is, or Ibrahim?
Yeah, I believe so.
Saying that that's pretty much done. All Darren's got to do is cover his travel and stuff like that. But now we're seeing more players in the game. Cam Soda have offered to have one of their Cam Soda girls come and corner Mike Perry, and I think in a letter they put, and I quote, "rub down you during grounds." So that's an interesting way to go about it. I think
don't think ESPN will allow that.
They probably won't. And I think on terms of the UK side of things, when we watch the fight nights and pay-per-views on BT Sport, during rounds they sometimes cut out sound and they sometimes go to commercials. And I can't remember who it was, but someone very vigorously requested no commercial breaks, no loss of corner audio. And this is if Darren Till's in the corner. And we just hope that fight against Robbie Lawler goes out the first round, because that round-to-round corner advice that Darren Till is going to give Mike Perry is absolute fucking gold. And I can't wait to see it, and hopefully it does happen.
What's the odds on them two fighting in between rounds?
Mid-round? Oh, I don't know, mate. I tell you what, I reckon you'd get a decent price on that.
Definitely, I think
I just can't, obviously they've gone back and forth. At one point they were going to fight, but it just never happened because Perry was too far down the rankings and the fight didn't make sense for Till. Mm-hmm. And now Till's moved up to 85. You might see the fight at 85, I don't know. But I think it is banter. And as you said, it's the English banter versus American banter, and it's completely different. And for me, the English banter is unrivaled. It's the best banter that's out there. There's a whole, especially with Darren Till, as we said, with his social game, it's just on another level.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Mike Perry would accept Darren Till in his corner, but we'll see what happens. But I mean, we haven't got to wait too long because the fight's in November, is it? I think
so. November, December. It's not that far away.
It's not that far away. So if we can see that, then that will be amazing to see Darren Till in Mike Perry's corner.
Definitely, and obviously, hopefully Darren Till is the highest bidder, because I'd imagine that Mike Perry has to go off his word. Then he can't say, Darren Till, you're the highest bidder, but I don't accept you. But again, to mention Dan Hardy, I was watching his interview with the McFly today, and his press conference he was doing. There was questioning the almost credibility of it, and he gave a slight dig to Diego Sanchez in his corner, saying that's almost a lot worse than Darren Till being in there, because at least Darren Till is qualified. But I don't care what Robbie Lawler you get. You don't want to be going in there with two unqualified people in your corner, do you? At least you got Darren Till, you got some sort of chance.
I mean, yeah, but maybe Mike Perry's looking at Robbie Lawler and his past performances, and maybe he thinks, I don't need a coach for that, because what have I got to prepare for? The guy's not done anything in a couple of years now. Maybe that's his mindset towards it. But as you said, I mean, it is a dangerous one, but on the evidence that we saw from Robbie Lawler, is it a dangerous one? I don't think it is from what we've saw. But we've all saw, Robbie Lawler throughout the years, been in some incredible fights. So, I mean, if I'm Mike Perry and I want to win a fight, which I hope he wants to beat Robbie Lawler, out of all the offers that he's had, I think Darren Till, despite the beef that they've had and the banter, I think that's a sensible choice.
Definitely.
Because at least Darren Till is going to go in there and give you advice, and advice from a fighter's perspective as well. Obviously, it's different when you're a coach, but as a fighter, you kind of know what's what. But the big question is Darren going to go in there, and I hope he doesn't, but is he going to go in there and sabotage it? He's going to go, you're doing fantastically. I want you to do takedown. I want you to do takedown. I want you to do any form of role that you can think of. Just do it. Just do like an Eddie Bravo, Tony Ferguson, So
groin strikes, got the lot. Throw him a groin strike out.
Well, that's the thing, is that it'll be nice. I guess it would almost be heartwarming, all the back and forth I've had, to see Darren Till in there between rounds, giving him genuine advice to win a fight. Can you imagine if Darren Till goes, I want you to throw the overhand right, and then all of a sudden Mike Perry throws overhand right and knocks Robbie Lawler out? and then they just hug in the. No, I don't know.
It's
I don't
it's
know
a mental world, isn't it? This year's been.
It is, and as we said, it's 2020. Anything could happen. Like if you would have said at the start of the year, COVID aside, that we saw, I mean, obviously the less said about it's the better. But Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather and
No
Darren
comment.
Till and absolutely no comment from you, especially when you've got that. But all these crazy things that happening this year, Darren Till in Mike Perry's corner is actually quite reasonable. I think it's safe to say. So I'm excited. Hopefully it happens.
Until that first bell rings and Darren Till throws in the towel.
Oh, can you imagine?
Just
Mike Perry would then jump the fence and then fight Darren Till.
I think Robbie Lawler would be pissed if the win he gets is off Darren Till throwing in the towel after 1 second.
Well, yeah, I mean, am I right in thinking that Darren Till was meant to face Robbie Lawler at some point?
Probably, because obviously he was on that hot streak up to the welterweight division. He rose those rankings pretty quickly, didn't he?
Yeah, I feel like there was a fight matched up, but I don't know if it fell through. I can't remember, but Robbie Lawler's been around for so long, and everyone's got footage of Robbie Lawler, and I'm sure that Darren Till would have prepared for Robbie Lawler at some point in his career, even if he just was watching tape just to see how he does things. So it's not a stupid appointment to be in his corner, and hopefully Mike Perry puts aside stuff like that and goes, it's actually not bad. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Okay, let's make up a scenario. I don't know which way I'm planning this yet, but you've got 5K to corner one fighter. Who are you choosing? And then on the flip side, you have to pay a fighter 5K to corner you.
Jesus. If I'm cornering a fighter, I am cornering. I don't know. There's so many fighters. I think for me, I'd want to corner someone who is coherent in the corner as well. Someone who obviously we saw a lot of corner cams over the years, and in fact, I'd want to corner Michael Bisping. Because I feel like Michael Bisping has such. We all know he's UK champion, and we haven't had one since, and he's a pioneer of British MMA. So. Fan aside, it would be an absolute honour to, corner Michael Bisping. And there's not many more durable fighters out there than Michael Bisping. So, unless he got knocked out in the first round, which God forbid he didn't, then, you'd have a good 15 minutes or 25 minutes in there with him. In terms of the other one, I would probably have in my corner. I don't know. There's so many enigmas, isn't there? There's so many egos that you'd want. I think you probably would have someone like a Mike Perry or Darren Till. I think you probably would. Just
two
purely
British guys.
good. Yeah. Two British guys. Bad, isn't it? The bias is there. But I don't know. But there's problem with UFC. There's so many fighters on the roster.
Yeah.
You don't know who you'd have with. In fact, I'd have Diego. I'd have Diego Sanchez in my corner probably.
Just to flip the role, see what he does in the corner.
Yeah, see if he's picked up any tips from good old Joshua.
That would be interesting. I think, that would be a sight to behold. And I think, guys, put it down in the comments below. You got 5K to coach one fighter, and you got 5K to spend on the fighter coaching you. Who are you picking? I think one. Probably coaching me. I know it's going to be cliche, but actually, no, I don't know if Adesanya would make a good coach. I think I'd be laughing more at probably some of the shit he says rather than, focusing on the fight. But
it's so hard. It is so hard to think because you want someone who's going to give you good advice, but at the same time, if you're paying 5K for it, you want someone who's you can have a laugh with a little bit as well. So you've got to find that balance.
Okay, coaching me. Ngannou, because he can teach me to knock out, and then I will coach. You know what? We've given him enough digs there. I'll coach Diego Sanchez. We'll see how that works out. It can't be that difficult, can it? Joshua Fabia's got to win. It can't be that hard.
It can't be that hard. In fact, I would quite happily corner or be cornered by Dan Hardy as well.
Dan Hardy would be a good one because he seems like an encyclopedia, dictionary, anthrosaurus of mixed martial arts.
He's got such a deep mind when it comes to MMA, and he's another pioneer of British MMA as well. So I know it's British bias, and I'm sorry, but it's just natural to just go that way. But yeah, Dan Hardy would definitely be towards the top of my list as well, because just as you said, the pure wealth of knowledge is is unrivaled.
100%. I think that's a good place to wrap it up on there, guys. First of all, obviously make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10k. Make sure to drop this video a like, and of course, comment down below Holm or GDR next to Amanda Nunes. Has Izzy and John Jones gone too far? And of course, do you want to see Darren Till corner Mike Perry? And of course, as we mentioned there, 5k to coach a fighter and 5k to be a coach a fighter. Let us little picks down in the comments below, and we will see you guys. Actually, make sure to follow Reese on Twitter at ReeseManUFC. And of course, Mitchell _, there as well. Make sure to drop MMA latest news or follow on Twitter and Instagram, of course. And we will see you guys on the next video.